really were the Magi? Where did they come from? According to Scripture, the Magi came from the east, and since they came to Jerusalem, they came from the east of Jerusalem. And that covers a lot of territory. Can we be more specific? There are two major views regarding the precise origin of the Magi. One view holds that they came from Persia, and that is modern Iran. Supporting this is the fact that the Greek word translated wise men, Magi, is a word of Persian derivation. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus used the word to refer to one of the tribes of the Medes and Persians. The Magi of ancient Persia were a religious caste who were involved in divination, the interpretation of dreams, and astrology. The latter practice would explain why the Magi attached great significance to a star. Proponents of the Persian view would also point out that some of the earliest Christian art depicts the Magi as wearing Persian robes. Proponents of the Persian view would be quick to remind us that some of the early church fathers included respected individuals of the stature of Clement of Alexandria and Chrysostom agree that the Magi came from Persia. During their various dispersions that took place from the 8th to the 6th centuries BC, some Jews were deported to the region of the Medes and Persians, 2 Kings 17 and Esther 9, and it's therefore entirely possible that some of these Jews witnessed to the Persians concerning their messianic hope. The other view regarding the origin of the Magi holds that they came from Babylon, the ancient nation that occupied what is now Iraq. Like the Persians, the Babylonians had their wise men and astrologers that we read about in Daniel chapter 2. That there were Magi in ancient Babylon is also indicated in Jeremiah 39:3, which tells us of Nergal-Sharezer the Rabmag. Rabmag literally means chief mag or the head mag. These Magi served in Nebuchadnezzar's court and probably had contact with Daniel and his Hebrew friends. Now, one could argue that through the influence of Daniel and his faithful friends, these Babylonian wise men came to hear of the true God. If these Babylonian Magi had access to chapter 9 of Daniel's prophecy, they could have known the exact time of Messiah's birth. Verse 25 reveals that from the time of the decree to the rebuild of Jerusalem to the coming of Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That is, 69 weeks of years or 483 years. With such a detailed schedule, these Babylonian Magi would have understood the appearance of the star in the heavens as more than just some fortuitous event. Both the Persian and Babylonian views have good arguments in their favor. No one can be absolutely sure to which view is the correct one. However, let us not forget that both Persia and Babylon are in roughly the same geographical area of the globe. We can locate their origin in this larger region of ancient Mesopotamia and its environs. In other words, we know for certain that the Magi did not come from Texas. What about the Magi in the New Testament era? In its earliest derivation, Magos had a somewhat restricted meaning and was descriptive of those in a particular religious caste. But by the New Testament era, the word came to have a broader connotation. It came to be applied to fortune tellers, magicians, and those devoted to esoteric religious practices. Simon the sorcerer has been called Simon Magos, with good reason, because the Greek word for sorcery comes from the word magos. Another example of the usage of this word magos can be found in Acts 13:8, where reference is made to Illumis the sorcerer, which literally is Illumis the Magos. Matthew is the only gospel writer who mentions the Magi. His record of their visit to the Christ child to worship him as King of the Jews, Matthew 2:2, is in keeping with the purpose of Matthew's gospel, which is to exalt Christ in his kingly office as the royal son of David. The Magi knew a great deal about Christ. They knew the approximate time and place of his birth, and they also knew about his royal kingship. God confirmed their understanding of these things with a star. But how, we may ask, did the Magi make the connection between the star and the Christ child? How did they know the star's purpose? We cannot be sure. Perhaps they knew Numbers 24:17. There shall come a star out of Jacob, and a scepter shall arise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab. Three Kings. Despite the words of the well-known hymn, "We Three Kings of Orient are," there's no statement in Scripture that the Magi were three in number or that they were kings. Perhaps this tradition started because, as we know, they brought three gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Legend claims that their names were Balthazar, Caspar, and Melchior. Some believe that their bones are to be found in the Cathedral of Cologne, but there's no basis for any of this in Scripture. Many traditions have been built around Christmas. Christians ought to be careful about traditions because they are sometimes misleading. For example, manger scenes often depict the Magi coming to the Christ child while he's in the manger, but the Bible tells us they came to the house, not the manger, Matthew 2:11. A faith that works. All of us covet God's favor, but the account of the Magi shows us that God's favor brings with it added responsibility. Though the Magi came from a region steeped in paganism, the Magi had been blessed with a knowledge of God. God blessed them with a special star to show them the way. What blessing! But because they knew more than other men, they had to labor more than other men. They had to make a westward journey of several hundred miles. The Apostle Paul was greatly blessed by God. He wrote, "But by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace which was bestowed upon me was not in vain, but I labored more abundantly than they all. Yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me." 1 Corinthians 15:10. Grace that makes us lazy and indifferent to the claims of Christ is not divine grace. God's grace moved the Magi to travel several hundred miles. If grace does not move you out of bed on Sunday morning, it's not the real thing. If grace does not put a burden upon you for the lost, it's not the real thing. Be sure that when you pray for God's favor and blessings, that you are willing to live up to the responsibilities those blessings will bring. How many pastors and elders and deacons and church members have prayed for revival? But friends, if and when revival comes, the Sunday morning service won't be over at 12 noon, and no one will dare look at their watches and roll their eyes at the preacher for preaching too long. Are you willing to have the altar crowded with weeping and broken people who will ask, "What must I do to be saved?" If not, don't pray for revival.